A lot of people. So I am very, very happy to come to this conference again. This is my second year here, and first year was awesome, and I'm glad to be back. The organizers are doing a very good job, so come and shake their hands, say thank you to them. They will appreciate it, and hopefully make more. Let's start. My name is Francois. Oh wait, that's the wrong person. My name is Dima Kovalenko. I work for a company called Groupon. My office is in Chicago, and I've been with them for a couple of years. So the topic is to reduce the amount of Selenium and replace it with a more unit testing based framework. If anybody has any questions, please ask me right away. I understand Russian, English, whichever works for you. Just go ahead and ask, and don't be shy, because I will be shy. So anyways, the very, very first question is, what do you use for in-browser testing? What is the tool that people use to make sure that everything works in the Internet Explorer? I mean, the answer is pretty simple. You have the Rational Robot, or IBM Robot now, and then you have Quick Test Pro, and you have Selenium. But for some reason, the in-browser testing is like the worst and most hated thing for most developers to do. How many people here are QA, software testers? Yeah. And let me guess, all of you are the ones who have to write the tests, because the developers don't really want to write the browser tests. They want to just write unit tests, and that's it. You are responsible for writing the actual Selenium tests and make sure that the browser works, right? So and that's kind of an issue, because believe it or not, Selenium has a couple of issues. I mean, there are little ones here and there, and one of the biggest ones is the, well, just reliability of the build, the stability. I mean, how often like, this is familiar, right? This is like every day, hey, oh, it's great. I mean, so many times I've been on projects where you actually see a red build and then you go in and you look, oh, okay, so it's 10 tests failing, that means it's still good. If it's 11 tests, oh no, something went wrong. But it's like getting the Selenium stability is so difficult and so painful. And I want to show up a little bit. I've spent the last year and a half working really, really hard to actually stabilize Selenium. And this is built at my company. We keep track of how often the Selenium fails due to real test issues and how often it fails due to some infrastructure or flakiness or something. And for the past 2 months, it's been at 0. It's been only failing for real. And that is amazing, but it took 2 years of just full-time work just to get it to here. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have with Selenium. And if you were to look at last 12 months, it's all over the place. So that was the biggest problem. Second biggest problem, of course, is the speed. Selenium tends to be very slow. And this is the build time that's been growing for us for a long time, and then it starts to drop off. And that's because, well, we just start to throw more machines at the problem. Instead of running things on one computer, now we're running it on 4 computers, 6 parallel tests. And that's the only way we can keep the build down to 15 minutes. Otherwise it goes to 2 hours, and sometimes it sits even longer. And that is a huge no-no. And if you need to find out that something broke really fast, who wants to wait 45 minutes? Most developers will give up at that point. And so the typical Selenium flow goes something like this. You go to a website, you load things, then you click things, then you go to another page, then you click again, and finally you get to the thing you're actually trying to test. I need to test the JavaScript on this page. I need to make sure that the email is checked. I have to go through 5 pages before I can get here for one test. And then you have these guys, like the Facebook, the Google, these guys will kill you every time, because for some reason they decide to just give you extra slow time. And so you end up with this weird situation where your build will just never end. So why is it so slow? I mean, the common browser speed, JavaScript speed, the JavaScript engines are so bad, especially if you have to use Internet Explorer, just sitting there. Also, like, so many other things that are affecting you. External URLs alone is an evil thing. If you have to deal with external websites, well, we have a talk for you for later today, so stick around. And finally, yeah, Internet Explorer is it's just the devil. I mean, it's the worst thing. It's the worst thing that has happened in the testing world, because it's just, I think it's just at some point it's easier just to give up on the Internet Explorer build if you don't have to, because it will eventually fail. I mean, there's just no doubt about when it will fail. It's how often it will fail for you. And so, at the end of the day, though, what I believe is that if you are using Selenium to test all your JavaScript and that's the only thing you're testing, you're doing it wrong. This one is not so good. Moving on. Anyways, Selenium is great for, like, if you're gonna test something for the whole workflow of the application. If you want to go from creating a user to purchasing something to printing something, great, use Selenium. If you're going to use it to test minor JavaScript things like pop-ups, like validation, things like that, Selenium is a bit of an overkill. So it's like, hey, it's too much power and too much everything, but yet it's going to be way too slow. So I'd like to talk about Jasmine. So Jasmine is the answer to the solution. It's made by these guys called Untitled Labs. The pivots. Oh, you can't see that. And it answers a lot of the issues that we have with Selenium. A lot of them, actually. So the first one is the reliability. Jasmine is a JavaScript testing framework. It's not application testing framework. So it tends to concentrate only on the browser, and it only is loading the things that it has to load. It doesn't go and load Google. It doesn't do Facebook. It doesn't do any of those things. It just loads your JavaScript files, and that's it. Browser compatibility, it's not bad. Internet Explorer still sucks. Nothing you can do about it. Things will fail because Internet Explorer decides that a click is not a click, or yeah. So, side note, I spent about 6 months trying to make Internet Explorer build stable with Jasmine, and two things. When the test starts, I had to make the window big, like full screen. And two, you have to move the mouse away from the screen. And once I did that, Internet Explorer became stable. Like, I don't know what's going on, but those two things, it's like the most random things, but once I did it, the test stopped failing. They went from fail once every 10 times to pretty much 0. And it's like, okay, so somebody please, anybody explain that to me. And finally, the speed. The speed is actually quite good. This is 3,500 tests. Internet Explorer being the slowest again. It takes 8 minutes to run 3,500 tests. However, on Google Chrome, it takes only 2 minutes. So instead of running, with Selenium, we have 400 tests and that takes 45 minutes. This does a lot more tests in a lot less time. And in here, you are limited by the speed of your browser, since it's all in the JavaScript in the JavaScript engine of the browser. It tends to be the only thing that slows you down. If you have a faster machine, great, but it's not as you're not limited by the network. You're not limited by the external resources. It's great in that respect. So it speeds things up. You get much faster results back. I'll show you a little bit more in a little bit of a test run in a minute. Finally, Jasmine is a behavior-driven tool, and this is the definition that I'm not going to read. But basically, the idea in a nutshell is that you describe how the application is supposed to work. You do not, in a test, you do not describe how a test should be implemented. You're just saying, hey, excuse me. the test looks something like this. Purchase flow should accept Visa, or I should be able to register a user, or I should be able to upload a picture. And this translated into Jasmine looks something like that, where you have a describe purchase flow, and it should accept Visa, and well, this true to be true, so it's going to be always best test ever. But yes, the advantage of it though is that describe the context and all that other stuff. If you guys are familiar with RSpec, anybody use RSpec at all? Yes. Well, these two people will be at home, everybody else will be lost. But if you are familiar with RSpec, it's literally a clone of RSpec in JavaScript. But the huge advantage of it is that everything is JavaScript. It's all JavaScript, written in JavaScript. So you can do anything you want to implement the test. You can call your objects, you can load things in Ajax, you can do all those things inside of your test relatively fast. Right there, you don't need to go outside of the language itself. However, you do need to learn JavaScript. I mean, so many people think that it's okay to write JavaScript without actually knowing JavaScript. And that's part of the reason a lot of the websites have such a crappy interface and things break, is because, hey, well, I can just type something up and it just works, and I don't need to test it. So, whoa, you can't see anything. It's awesome. Anyways, yeah, I can't do anything about that. It looks good on my computer, so. But learn JavaScript, please do. And it is a difficult language. It is kind of weird. Your head will hurt for a while. But once you learn it, though, it will help out a lot. Especially since so many websites are moving away from server-side and more to client-side applications. And you have things like Backbone. You have things like jQuery, Prototype, all these things. They're now running inside of your browser. So you do not have the ability to just kind of say, no, I'm not just going to worry about it. If you're going to keep testing the applications of the future, you will have to get with the times and you have to learn the new language, because that will help you out. And after reading about 3 JavaScript books at this point, I still don't know what's going on, but a little bit better understanding of what's going on, how to do things. So, yeah. Quick rundown of Jasmine. It has a couple of things. Let's go into detail on some things. So mocks and spies. You can double any function automatically with a mock, and that way you can easily create a test function that would go and make an Ajax call. It will create that for you, and it will say, hey, the Ajax call did happen. Here's the result. So you can stop things out a lot faster. You can mock the clock, which is very useful actually. If you can change and tell JavaScript, hey, it's actually year 2000. Let's prepare for Y2K. And you can actually import little things from these are the fixtures. You can import little pieces of your application into the code, and so you can be running the JavaScript test against the little forms. Some of the measures are very simple. You have to expect, equals, not to, equal, and if these are not enough, you can write your own expectations, and you can say, hey, expect something that, you know, it's Tuesday or something like that. I don't know. Again, as with RSpec, you have the before each, setup and teardown, and finally, this is the big one. You can use callbacks. You can test callbacks. You can make sure that when you call a function in JavaScript, or you make a Ajax request against Google, and you provided a callback function, you can actually verify that it did get called, and it did what it was supposed to do. So this is the big one, especially for those one-page applications like Google Maps or whatever you want to use. You can actually now go and test those things and not have to load in Selenium the whole thing and hope that it works. Once it's written in, it's just HTML and JavaScript. It's very simple. If you want to set up some tests right away, you just create a HTML page. You require all of your JavaScript files, and you require all of your spec files, and it will just run. I use Ruby, so it has two more components. It has array, it has RSpec and ERB. RSpec being used for the Jenkins to tell which test passed and failed. So it just goes down this list where it's just Break calls the HTML page, which calls Selenium, which calls the HTML page again and loads it in the browser, and then it just sits there and waits for things to finish. These are the supported environments. So you can you know, if you're in a Java application and you have some JavaScript on the front end, you can definitely go in there and support, take care of it. So, but even if it's not, if you're using something that is not supported, since it's just plain HTML, you can make your own test environment, and it will be just running very, very fast. The installation for Ruby is very simple. Just install Jasmine and init, and it will create all the directories for you. So that's pretty much it for the slides. I will take questions now. I can show you how it works. Whichever way, if anybody has questions, just fire away.
Здравствуйте, Виталий, компания Форум. Вот это средство тестирования Jasmine. Насколько легко его будет строить существующую инфраструктуру с Selenium? Ну, предположим, у нас есть Selenium, Grid, TestNG, ну и там обертка на Java, ну или любом другом языке программирования. Так, чтобы видеть результаты примерно там, в одном видео, в одном стиле, и чтобы это все вместе работало.
Okay, the question is how hard is it to integrate Jasmine into the existing workflow and to just kind of unify it with existing Selenium tests and whatnot. So it's, by default, I'm not sure how it will work with Java, per se. They might put things out into JUnit, so you can have the tests, Jenkins or whatever can read those, but I'm not sure. With Ruby, I have RSpec, and then RSpec you can add JUnit extension to RSpec and say that's a JUnit formatter, so it will output things for either like HTML for you or the XML files. So that's what we use, the XML files that Jenkins just kind of takes all the test names and just puts them into Jenkins and has them things. So it's relatively easy. What about the writing of the code? It's if you know JavaScript or have a basic idea, it doesn't really take that much time. Probably in 10 minutes you can get one test easily. But it really depends on your Jenkins setup, I guess, or CI, whatever CI you're using. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? A little bit, anything? Well, I can come back. Yeah, come talk to me, I'll definitely answer.
Спасибо за доклад. Сам недавно попробовал Jasmine, очень понравился для проведения ТДД, для работы ТДД. Вопрос в следующем. Как можно кастомизировать те отчеты, которые он генерирует? То есть по умолчанию отчет, в принципе, достаточно симпатично, хочется зачастую видеть, например, скриншоты страницы, на которые что-то выдело, чтобы было немножко нагляднее, какие-то другие вещи, какие-то атачи, показать скорость, показать тесты и так далее, и так далее. Насколько кастомизировать именно отчеты?
Okay, the question is how hard is it to add, to customize the output of Jasmine? It really depends on how, again, I'm in the Ruby world, it really depends on how good your Ruby is, but for me to add the JUnit support for Jenkins, that was relatively easy. I just went and Googled for RSpec, any formatter that RSpec supports, you can use it. So if you want to do HTML output, you can do that. If you want to do just the dots on the screen, you can do that. If you want to write your own custom formatter, you can do it. And I did write a custom formatter that output JSON, and it was about 20 lines of code. And always is just like okay, if the test failed, just write the name of the file of the test, put it in a JSON file, and then you have an array of all the test failures. So that helps with the keeping track of like how often the test fails and which one is flaky or not. So if you're familiar with Ruby, it's very fast. I'm not familiar with the Java or the PHP version of it, so I'm not sure how they did it there, but with Ruby, it's very, very easy. What else? All right. So we have the in the home directory for the what do you call it, the Git repo, we have it in the break Jasmine CI Firefox. Jesus, Firefox will find it. Let me see how fast it is. Firefox tends to be a little bit slower, but then Jasmine CI FF. The reason I'm using Firefox is because it's a little bit slower than Chrome, so you can actually see how things are done. This guy, he works on Chrome, so he's very proud. Yeah, this is looking already running on Chrome. Yeah. Each. Okay, forget it. Let's do this scrolling. But Jasmine has two running modes. One of them is continuous integration, and that's basically you run a command, it will run everything for you, and then it will output a nice little test report for you. And this is used in CI environment. The other one is the developer environment, which I will show in a second. Oh, it's already running. So whether it's going crazy, and this is basically every single test. You can see that things are popping out. It's not as pretty as to look at it as watching Selenium run, because it's just very dots and then you see all these other things. But the speed of it is just amazing. And while that is going, if you just run break Jasmine, what it will do is it will start up a server for you with just an endpoint. So while this is going, so it started up a server for me on 888, and what I can do is go and just run it like this, which is useful when you are actually writing the JavaScript code, but you don't have to rerun the command. All you have to do is just refresh the page and it will rerun it. Or you can, if you catch it, click on a single test and it will just execute just one test for you. Let's refresh. And so what it did is that it loaded the whole environment for you, and it's supposed to just run one single test, and based on that, crashy. This is like live demo is like the worst thing you can do. It will crash when you least expect it. But anyways, see, there's one green dot. So it's one of the things I'm working on right now is to try to contribute to the project where if you just want to run one single test, it loads all of the JavaScript onto the page, and I don't like that because it loaded all the tests but only ran one single one right here. So that's a lot of time that is spent by the browser just loading out pages. What I'm working on is just saying, hey, when you run one single test, just load that one test and nothing else. I did try to use this guy with Sauce Labs or Amazon Cloud. It seems to work. The only problem with it is that, again, we have too many tests that by the time all of the tests are loaded to the browser of the cloud, the Selenium WebDriver ends up timing out because of all the up and down trips that's happening. So that's the only disadvantage. If you have a smaller one and you only have a couple of tests and you have some sort of a cloud-based infrastructure, you can plug right into it. But yeah, anybody got any questions about what you've seen here? I'd love to answer anything.
So your test was pretty readable, like it was nice to see, but there was a lot of noise, like it's nested function calls. Like there were 3 functions and like a lot of nesting, and so as someone who, like the thing I care about is in a test is understanding by reading what it does. And I found that kind of awkward in that test because it was like function, like 3/4 of the stuff on the page wasn't about the test. Like can you write cleaner tests?
Yes, you can actually, but well, first of all, the first part is JavaScript. It's JavaScript. Come on, what do you expect? It's gonna be dirty. It's gonna be nasty. Anyways, this is the RSpec output that we have. All the green dots all the way around. So 3,600. I was wrong. So it's 3,600 tests around. But and what he's talking about is of course this part right here. And you can write a much cleaner test actually if you use CoffeeScript. CoffeeScript allows you to get rid of the majority of this stuff and just have describe, purchase flow, stop, like arrow. It should accept Visa, and that's it. CoffeeScript is great. If you guys have not seen it, it's a great little framework for taking a lot of the JavaScript issues and making it a much more readable and much more fun language. It takes care of a lot of the JavaScript problems like hiding, scoping, and doing the anonymous functions for you. So everything in CoffeeScript is an anonymous function. So a lot of this stuff ends up being much simpler to read and display in JavaScript. So yeah, just yeah.
Only one observation about CoffeeScript, because I hate it a lot. I really hate CoffeeScript. How do you test it once it breaks? Once it breaks and something is broken in your code, how do you debug it? So I don't want to start the flame, but really, my mission in life is to destroy anyone that thinks that CoffeeScript is good. I like you, we have been out yesterday, so it's fine, but this thing, no. How do you debug it?
Wow. Tough crowd. I mean, you debug it the way you would debug JavaScript. I mean,
You don't have to debug it.
huh? You don't. Yes, but you can. Where is it? Or if you're using Firebug, and I mean, come on, it's jQuery something, right? You get in your browser, since it's always running, and all you have to do is just refresh to load up all the new JavaScript. You can access pretty much anything and just debug it that way.
Yeah, but you end up debugging Java. Java is generated by your CoffeeScript.
Yes.
And if that is complicated, you have no idea why you have that Java. You have native CoffeeScript. That's the bridge.
Fair enough. Java. I will respectfully disagree with you. JavaScript is very, very bad, and anything that makes it a little bit better, it's still it's a plus. Yes, we'll fight it out. But no, the cool part about Jasmine also is if you guys are using Node.js for your server on the back end, you can use Jasmine Node to actually test your back-end applications. So that helps out a ton with Node applications, and I actually looking for some Node projects to do because that's the new hot thing to do, I guess. Anybody else? I spoke too fast. My problem is I drank too much coffee, so I tend to go really fast. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you please show the report example?
The what?
Report.
Reports? Oh, okay, sure. So this is the custom reporter that I made, so that I can parse it later and debug it. Okay, let me see if I can make it a little bit better. Like a lot of it is junk. So let me just real quickly delete the junk. We ended up dumping a lot of the test information, how fast each individual test runs, so we can actually high tune the JavaScript for us. But if I delete most of it, this is the actual report that I care about. And let me make a test fail on purpose real quick. Spec. Let's see, JavaScript. Okay, so in this one, let's just make it expect true to be false, right? So if I run just this guy, so since it's a custom one, basically what it will do is inside of the failures, it will list the file where it failed, and then it will list the JavaScript stack trace of what has went wrong. And if you care for the XML files for the CI, then that basically it does output all the XML files also, so that when you're looking at Jenkins, it just draws you the graph. The other option, of course, is to output it to straight out HTML, and it will look very similar to what you see right here. So I don't have internet connection, but what it will do is it will look something like this for the HTML output, where it just lists all the files and all the capacity. Again, what is the target, I guess, output? Is it you're trying to go for a JUnit so that Jenkins can read it, or is it you're trying to make your own file? You know? Right.
I think it's better to customize it with the groups, suits, and fail reasons, fail descriptions on each fail reason in HTML.
So it's about not to only see fail 100 tests and fast 200 tests. It's about to see more detailed information.
Yeah, this is the thing you're looking for. This little all this info right here. It's like here's the stack trace. This file got called, and this file got called, and this one. And what it does is when this file gets generated for me, since it's a custom formatter for our spec, all it does is it just throws that stack trace into here, so that you have one failure, and then you have the whole test name, which was this guy, and then you have the stack trace inside of here. That's just what I wrote for the JSON output. That way, it's much faster than the XML files.
Okay.
Yeah, I think come talk to me. I think I might be misunderstanding your question, so I will definitely try to explain everything you want to know.
I just wanted to summarize for myself what Jasmine is. So as I understood, it just load the partial UI, and so hence the question is how and where you actually declare what kind of libraries to load, and how do you resolve possible dependencies and so on.
Okay, so Jasmine allows you to set up something called there's a YAML file that lives in this guy. So basically, you load all of your JavaScript files here, and then in the end you tell it to load where the tests are. And then inside of these files, because JavaScript the way it is, you can load up jQuery if you have dependency in jQuery or some other file. Inside of these files right here, whichever one, you can load it up and have just basically a global variable. Because how familiar are you with JavaScript? Okay. So the problem with the JavaScript is that everything is global, and so if you have a dependency and you load it on one file, it's available to everywhere in the browser. So if what we did is we would output the what do you call it? We have one or two files that all they do for test is that they load all the dependencies, like jQuery and all that stuff, and then the rest of the test just kind of refer to them. So it's only in one place.
But that list you built.
So you probably must be familiar with the libraries you load. So, for example, if my role in the project is software development test, and I'm not that familiar in those libraries, I just can see at CRC of a page what of a real page what kind of libraries to load. So how do you manage this? Do you have any kind of test as to who uses this framework, or just you?
It's mostly the developers who end up using it. Anybody who has, you have to basically pick up and learn some JavaScript to use it. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess it's all the dependencies are, yeah. How do I answer that? Basically, you have to learn a little bit of JavaScript before you can start using it, and then once you do, you have to. JavaScript is such a weird language that I want to answer your question, but I don't know how to.
No, just even if I knew JavaScript fair enough, I has to be at least partial UI developer to understand all those interactions.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah, that's the problem. With Selenium, you can record just clicks and stuff. Here, you will have to get a little bit more dirty and get a little bit. The advantage of it, though, is it's a lot more stable and a lot more better and consistent output than if you just did with Selenium. Where Selenium, the more technical you get, the better the results are, the more consistent your results will be. So that's the trade-off. But that's how I started out with just clicking, and then I started to learn more code. And the more code I learned, the more it made sense to learn more code, and it just works out pretty well that way.
First of all, thank you for your talk. It was fun. Presentation was good. I have actually a couple of questions. So first of all, you have started your talk with describing Selenium issues and stuff like that, and then switched to Jasmine.
Yes.
So I wonder, how do you use Selenium now? So it looks like you're still using it for some purposes, like for application flow testing and stuff like that, and use Jasmine more for unit testing. So I'm just curious, what's the state of Selenium right now in Groupon?
So it's green, right? But we're also constantly, because we have so many Selenium tests, we have to constantly review and say maybe we should move this guy out of Selenium and into Jasmine to increase the stability of it. But some tests you cannot do in Jasmine. We have a couple of tests where you upload pictures onto the web server to make sure, like, the profile pictures, stuff like that. So you have to do that in Selenium. However, we have some tests that check that the credit card check mark is showing up properly, right? So those tests, you can move them into Jasmine, and that's what we've been doing. So when I first started, we only had about 2,000 Jasmine codes. We have 3,600 now. So we're just starting slowly deleting Selenium tests and moving over and just keeping the Selenium as little as possible. So that's the goal at it.
Okay, second question. Do you see the need in running the tests in parallel? So it looks like executing the whole test in 2 to 8 minutes is pretty fast, But still, have you tried, or do you see the goal to run the tests in parallel for Jasmine?
Yes. So that's one of the things that I'm currently working on, and hopefully as soon as I commit to the Jasmine repository, they will accept it. But basically, the need to start testing in parallel, because it would be nice to have those 3,000 tests on the Windows browser run in 2 Internet Explorers, and maybe cut it down to 4 minutes instead of 8 minutes. So it's a work in progress, but it's not ready yet. So one day.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Also 2 questions. First is it possible to use Jasmine for some kind of performance testing?
No. Garbage, no. I mean, you shouldn't be using Selenium for performance testing either, to be honest, but no, because it's kind of out of context. The only thing you will be testing is the speed of your browser, but it's not really, yeah.
And the second question is it possible to run Jasmine test on mobile web browsers, both in emulator and real device?
Yeah, I mean, as long as your browser supports JavaScript, you can run it. So you can run it on your phone. If I said this, if my network would work, I would be able to just load that page up. It's all it is literally HTML and JavaScript. It's not very complicated. So if you go to that on your phone, you will see exactly the same thing, and your phone will be running the test. So you can start up an emulator and your farm, and just to make sure that it's your.
My question is, how is to automate it using, for example, Jenkins?
So in Jenkins, we just use the rake command, and it just starts up everything for us. It comes with the Jasmine gem comes with rake command that launches Selenium, which takes care of the browser and everything for you. So that's where the Selenium ties into it. That's the thing that drives the front end of it. So and then it kind of steps away. Selenium doesn't do anything else. So it just kind of says, "Hey, here's your browser. Okay, you can run this now."
Thank you.
Yes.
And when you started using Jasmine, because I remember your speeches from last year, from April Selenium conference, and it was about Ruby and Selenium and Cucumber.
Yes.
And how long how long it took to introduce Jasmine to your project? I mean, from you thought about using it to this, and you had the first test.
Yeah. So we've been using Jasmine for a long time. Actually, we've been using it, I think, since version 0.2 or something like that. We have many builds. Right now we have Selenium builds, we have Cucumber builds that are just browserless, we have RSpec builds, and we have Jasmine builds, and it's just everybody kind of, the people who are writing the front end, they tend to write Jasmine tests, the people who write back end, they use RSpec, and then there's Cucumber plus Selenium. So for that, it's been a couple of years we've been using Jasmine, so it's been great for that. But for you to get up and running, you can probably just go to their website and download a simple HTML page, and then add a couple of lines, and it will be up and running. Again, for a simple test, you can have 1 or 2 tests in 10 minutes. It's again, JavaScript must. But once you know JavaScript, it's actually really, really easy, and it's all the same. Pushing into a process. I really gotta get more coffee. Yes.
Okay, we've seen here a lot about speed, but have you get like total stability that you have with Selenium tests?
So again, with the Selenium, majority of the instability that I've seen comes from external URLs. It tends to be either Google Analytics or Facebook or something. It's that seems to be the most problems that JavaScript Ajax calls are the ones who kill you when it comes to stability in Selenium. And so you try to click on something that's not there yet, whatever. So the advantage of this guy is that everything is already preloaded into the page. All the JavaScript is preloaded. So there's no situation where you try to access some resource that's not there. So it's always going to be there. That's kind of the point of it. And so because of that, there's a lot of the stability is that you have some instability with Internet Explorer, with little things here and there, but overall, in general, this is a lot more stable than Selenium. I'm talking about, like, I have right now maybe 20, 30 flaky Selenium tests, but 0 flaky Jasmine tests. And it's kind of difficult to get them to be flaky unless you do something very stupid or Internet Explorer. Yeah, that's what comes down to the Internet Explorer.
How close to the reality are the results of these tests? I mean, do they really review the issues that the end user will encounter?
Yes, actually, for stability, it's kind of weird when the Jasmine build goes red. It's kind of like, wait, what just happened? That it just almost never happens. But when it does, it's like you look at it and you find out that Internet Explorer does not recognize some library, and that's the reason it's failing. So it does catch a lot of the stuff for the before the users would, where it's like again, especially for Internet Explorer, that's seriously we need to kill that browser. But yeah, it catches a lot of the bugs that we would in production for people who use Firefox. It tends to be very solid. Chrome very, very solid. It does catch bugs all the time for the developers, but part of the way that our CI is set up is that if your test is failing, you cannot commit. So anytime somebody writes some test and tries to commit, we run all the tests first, and if they are all green, then we merge. Otherwise, we just say, no, you're not allowed to go, and that prevents a lot of the bugs from going out. So Jasmine does catch issues for us. Yep, that's it. My time is up.